Hello and welcome to Teachers Lounge, lessons learned from remote and hybrid instruction. My name is Michael Ham and I'm a program specialist in the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Educational Technology, otherwise known as OET. As an office, we think critically about the role of educational technology in classrooms, schools, and districts across the country and collaborate with our colleagues throughout the Department of Education to ensure that policy and guidance enable the powerful, forward-thinking, and innovative use of ed tech. As you all know, over the course of the past year, COVID-19 brought about the greatest disruption to education in modern history. In responding to this disruption, teachers have been called on to rapidly transform their crafts overnight and suddenly consider EdTech's integration into their instruction in ways they likely never had before. Tonight, I am joined by 5 educators who have done just this and more for a discussion on exactly how that experience went and what lessons surrounding EdTech we can bring back into the classroom as schools across the country return to in-person instruction. With that, I'll turn it over to these incredible educators to introduce themselves. Erica, do you mind going first?
Hi, I'm Erica Reddick. I'm a 3rd grade virtual teacher in Mustang Public Schools, which is just a suburb of Oklahoma City.
Thanks, Erica. Chris?
Sure. My name is Chris Aviles. I'm a teacher for the Fairhaven School District over at Knollwood Middle School. I teach 4th through 8th grade game design, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And I also started the first middle school esports team in the country here 3 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Angela?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Angela Daniel. I'm the college and career strategist here at Sci-High at Seminole County Public Schools. And while a college and career strategist, I'm also one of the coaches of our esports team.
Thanks, Angela. Ladara?
Good evening, everyone. I am Ladara Lee. I am a work-based learning coordinator for Minor High School in Jefferson County, Alabama, right outside of Birmingham, and I'm excited to be here.
And last but not least, Elise.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Elise Knable. I teach at Caesar Rodney High School in Camden, Delaware. I teach a program that is called ARVED, which stands for Audio, Radio, Video Engineering Design. And we are heavily based in work-based learning as well as career and technology education in our school.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So we've got folks from across the country. We've got folks representing all different kinds of specialties and subject areas. I'm incredibly excited about our conversation today. So with that, let's jump right into it. My first question is going to be for Angela. Angela, can you tell us about your transition online or pivoting to whatever model your school adopted in response to COVID-19 and what structural factors like infrastructure, device access, et cetera, serve to either support or inhibit that transition?
Sure, thank you. Well, initially, when spring break happened in 2020, they made the call to send everyone home. Fortunately for us, we're a one-to-one program, so the students already had devices in their hands for that, and with some support of some Wi-Fi hotspot systems, we were able to make that work. And we initially started with pre-built, consistent template courses that the students could find everything they needed in consistent places across the board. What we were finding is our students were highly anxious about the change and all the other things going on. So we felt that that was the best way to give them stability. But we also built in community opportunities like dinners with your teacher and 11 o'clock study hours. And we maintained our advisory structure also that really helped. And then when we came back for the summer, our school district decided to go fully integrated with regard to hybrid in every single classroom, at least operationally every single classroom. So that looked very different once we came back.
Thanks, Angela. Does that resonate with anyone else, or Elise?
Yes, so I just wanted to comment on the one-to-one because I think that was a challenge that a lot of districts faced, especially when we look at some of the systemic problems that across the country were blatant when this started. Our district was not one-to-one. We have a very large district. Our high school has about 2,200 students. Last year we had 2,400. And when we left school on March 13th, we weren't sure what it was going to look like. They basically asked us to take a break for a week and try to figure out, how we could make things work. The past spring, we had about a day of some PD and we had some assistance, and they said, do your best, do what you can. We did Zoom, but we couldn't expect students to Zoom because at the time there was not the equity across the district. This past summer, they did move to go one-to-one. They got Chromebooks to all students. We have in Delaware, despite the fact we're a small state, we have a lot of outlying areas that do not have a really good Wi-Fi or internet. So the district not only did a one-to-one initiative, they started to give out mobile hotspots for families. And they also have Wi-Fi buses now that go to areas around our district that do not have good internet. They also did free Wi-Fi in all of our school parking lots. So last year, in fact, my Wi-Fi went out when all the nodes were burning up from everybody Zooming around us. And I went and sat and taught from the parking lot with about 4 other teachers. We don't have a set curriculum because we are a comprehensive high school. So instead, we were given some guidance in how we can structure our day. But other than that, it has very much been teachers finding the methods that work the best in our classrooms with the tools and utilities given to us by our district. But I think the one-to-one is extremely important going forward. If districts don't have that capability because of the funding, then it needs to become part of a discussion because that's so essential in any framework we're in right now.
Chris.
I think the only thing that I could add, and maybe some of the other panelists were in the same boat that I was, my district too was one-to-one with Chromebooks, and that worked out well. And I'm very lucky to teach in a district where most students have internet. But where I personally had a lot of trouble as an educator was my class, as an entrepreneurship class, as a game-based design class, is a little bit more tech heavy and also reliant on certain tools and products that I have in my classroom. So without access to like our laser cutters, our 3D printers, some of our more powerful laptops where kids were doing some of their more serious game design, really had to get scrappy about, making the class work for everybody, even to the point where setting up little, project bags where the kids would come and pick them up and then they would have some of the materials at home, and that got to be, pretty time consuming. One of the things I teach is computer science, and in the classroom, I use videos. I use a form of blended learning where the kids will watch the videos and then they will do what they see, and that frees me up to go about the classroom to work one-on-one with the students. And having to model that when they were all virtual, having the kids in a Zoom, but then also having them watch a video in a secondary tab and then in a breakout room where I could jump in and help them. Again, it's one of those things where as time went by, we got a little bit better at it. The kids got used to it. But some of these more technical and some of these more, I would say, teacher reliant type of skills like computer science was really difficult. And I think we have to think about how do we amend CTE and STEM, even seeing my colleagues who are science teachers, the way that they came up with to do labs with the kids while they were home. I mean, there's some genius ideas out there, but I think, that's something that we have to look at is how do we continue that experience while kids are at home, teacher heavy like that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And Eric, I see your hands up too.
Yes, I was going to echo what Elise and Chris both said. My district is not one-to-one. So when we came back this year, I'm a virtual teacher, so I have the students who chose to be virtual. But our school has had to go in and out of distance learning based on COVID numbers. When that happened, the teachers actually had to make paper packets to send home. That's a lot of paperwork. And then they don't have their teacher there with elementary. They're not independent learners. So they didn't have someone right there explaining, doing the lesson. Mine is a little different because I've been virtual and I talk to my students every day. But for those students that were here and transitioned to distance learning, they just had a packet of paper that they had to use to do their lessons. And then what Chris was saying, last year, I was a math interventionist. So, we need hands-on manipulatives. And it was so hard, even this year as a virtual teacher, teaching base 10, teaching fractions, and I just have a DocuCam set up and I'm modeling, but they need the things in their hands also. So it was very difficult. We needed to make little manipulative kits for our children virtual. So it is hard to adapt everything that we do in the classroom over a screen. I can teach and give you information, but to sit there and practice, it's been a weird transition.
Absolutely. And Ladera.
We're all on the same page nationwide regarding having to adjust and how to adapt as educators. Especially in my district, we were not one-to-one with our student technology. And being a teacher that taught business technology applications with the goal of Microsoft Office certification, it was quite challenging, especially when the district issued Chromebooks to our students that did not have the Microsoft Office features. And so it's just been an adjustment period. That's when COVID first broke out, but over this past school year, we've been able to adapt and adjust and better prepare our students to even get Microsoft Office specialist certifications.
Elise.
I want to, everybody I feel like said the same thing, and I kind of want to say it as well. I think one of the shining moments in this entire situation is the opportunity we have when we rebuild to really consider everything everybody just said. When we look at this fact that we need to be in person, we need to be hands-on, but that concept of hands-on, I think for a lot of people has changed in a way of how do we produce that. I too struggled. My students don't have mics at home. They don't have cameras. They got Chromebooks, and WeVideo is nowhere near Adobe Premiere. But when we start to transition back, one of the things I keep talking about, and I heard everybody say it, is, we really can see the impact of educators being in the classroom with students. And the impact is not because we stand over their shoulder and monitor them. The impact is actually what is taking place moment by moment. And that's a realization that I think needs to be put out there, because we are not glorified sitters. We are truly building the future of our country. And I hope that in the rebuild we do this year, that acknowledgement can be made, and some adjustments even in the higher up, government area can be done, because I think that is a light that was shed on this situation, is no matter what, teachers made it happen. And like you said, fantastic lessons, amazing things, like just the things teachers did were incredible at the blink of an eye. And I hope that acknowledgement goes out there, because we are much more than I think people ever realized we were to our students.
Absolutely. What a great summary. Getting a little ahead of ourselves with the questions, but a very, very great job. My next question is going to be for Erica. You hinted at this a little bit in your last answer, but I want to explore a little bit more the actual changes to instructional practices, and like how and why those changes were necessary. So I'd love to open it up just to talk about like how did instruction actually change?
Okay, and with me being a virtual teacher, what I do changed completely. The other teachers at my school have had to flip-flop. We haven't had a hybrid model here in the elementary. So they've been in-person teachers and then switched to distance at the drop of a hat. So what we did to help support that is we adopted a learning management system where we take at the elementary level the curriculum that we have that our school district uses, and we take that curriculum, put it into the learning management system. I record all of my lessons using whatever means I have. A lot of times it's me talking, sharing Google Slides, Get Up at Books, whatever it is that I need. And I put that in a day's folder and my children do their work. What was so great about doing that is when our teachers had to flip-flop to distance learning, I shared everything that I had made. So I took, as best as I could, what I would do in the classroom, put it into the learning management system, and just delivered my lessons. I was heavily reliant on parent participation. It was almost like homeschooling with the teacher on demand is the way I felt about it. It wasn't a pre-made curriculum. It was everything that the virtual teachers put together based on our school district curriculum, and then put that out as lessons to do. They come back through the learning management system, and then I hand grade it. But it's been hard, it's been challenging, it's been really neat, but then I've been able to share that with the rest of my elementary school when they've needed it for their students. So it's been good and bad. I was kind of the guinea pig and had to come up with how to best do it. Still using sometimes we just had to have the kids come get their workbooks if it was a math workbook, and I would work with them through the workbook, and then they would submit their work, take pictures of it, upload it, and send it to me. So very different, but it was what we needed to do to support the learners. I mean, like you were saying, at the drop of a hat. Our school district has been wanting to open up a virtual school for several years. It was still a few years off. COVID came, and boom, here it was. Figure it out. They gave us an extra week at the beginning of the school year, and that's what we did.
For sure. Angela.
Well, like Erica points out, and that's amazing that you were able to get all of that together in that short period of time. One of the challenges of moving everything into a student's home is not just having those learning experiences, but also collecting them. In school, we have practices that are put in place in order to construct that learning over time and go back and reflect on it. And that was one of the first initial struggles that we really started thinking about. And one of the things that we did do is we moved that constructive learning online with Google Slides. So we had the students constructing design journals. And there were so many things that came out of that, like this very conversational feedback as opposed to evaluative feedback and things like that, that actually ended up being wonderful iterations of what we had been doing before. And then finding the wonderful thing about the going home is that you have this incredible family interaction possibilities, and also these time and space differentials. So just because your time isn't necessarily my time, but we can all get things done together. But then those same wonderful benefits are also challenges based on our ability and our students' ability and their families' capacity to regulate those things and things like that. So it seemed like every time there was a massive challenge, it also highlighted a wonderful opportunity, and vice versa.
Thank you, Angela. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting listening to Erica and Angela is how similar our experiences were. But what was interesting is hearing what they had to say. I also felt myself thinking, okay, you know, what I had to do for my kids, when I saw a lot of colleagues doing for my kids, was that self-paced, self-directed, conversational kind of learning style. But then, you know, what I started to experience was just being overwhelmed, where, you know, everybody had a reason where they couldn't make the deadline, and every situation students were in was unique. And one of the things I had to do as an educator was I just had to set clear boundaries, because, you know, getting emails at all hours of the night, work getting turned in all hours, you know, at some point I wanted to accommodate and help and do everything I could for my students, but it began to cost, you know, me, you know, in a lot of ways, my sanity. You know, specifically, you know, it's kind of a running joke around here is when students turn in or, you know, resubmit something in like Google Classroom, there's no notifications. So a lot of times we're left to guess. Did they submit it? Did they resubmit it? And very quickly it became overwhelming to track how everybody was doing. So I think that's one of the things too that I think we are going to need to consider for the side of the educators is, what are these boundaries going to be? What are we going to say when the work is late and the circumstances, you know, are unique and different and important for each student? But again, you know, it's just there's got to be a balance to it, you know. I think the other thing that I wanted to share about the way, you know, the unique style changed, and maybe Angela wants to back me up, is, you know, there are equity issues in esports, but one of the things we were able to do at my district is give our kids the devices they needed to continue to participate on the esports team. And what I loved about that is that was my way to connect and continue to see my kids and give them some sense of normalcy, all, you know, through all that was going on, because all their other activities, all their other you know, things that they enjoyed doing in their free time were canceled, but my esports team was able to continue to practice and play their matches. And I know for a lot of my students, that was something that was very meaningful to them. So, you know, I think for me, when it comes to my classroom, I could be pretty flexible, but I found my flexibility when it transferred online really started to honestly affect my ability to teach when I was just overwhelmed with all of the work that came in and the deadlines and the due dates and, the home situations that I wanted to do my best to accommodate and work through. But then I think, considering how do we continue to meet the social emotional learning needs of students. So it's, the only contact time they're getting with a trusted adult isn't based around work, right? How do we have those, I saw educators hosting almost like movie nights and stuff like that, where the kids would come into Zoom and watch things together. So I think that's the other thing we want to consider as well is, if and when this continues, how can we make sure we're meeting those social emotional learning needs of students?
Absolutely. Let's go Elise and then Erica.
Thank you, and I apologize if I lag. We literally have internet issues around us. I teach high school, so I feel like it has been a different kind of experience, and I teach in a district that we are not completely low income, but we definitely have a large group of students who are low income. Our class day went from 7 class periods to a split. So we started having 4 class periods on Mondays and Thursdays, 3 class periods on Tuesdays and Fridays, and then Wednesday was asynchronous. Now, because our district gave out 1-to-1, students are required to come to Zooms 4 days a week. And then their afternoons are considered office hours. So they can come to us. We have Zooms open all afternoon. While our Zooms are open, if nobody's there, we're planning, we're working on other things. But what's interesting is that our students feel overwhelmed because they are struggling with time management. They are struggling with pacing. I remind them, even though you leave your Zooms at 12:40, school goes till 2:30. You're supposed to be using those 2 hours. You're supposed to be using your Wednesdays to work. And they do, but I also acknowledge, and in speaking about equity, like Chris mentioned, I have students who are working so that their parents don't lose their home. I have students that are taking care of siblings so their parents can go back to work. I have students who have had aunts, uncles, grandparents move in because they were stuck in a nursing home and that was their choice. So it has been an extremely difficult year as a teacher who believes in grace and compassion to spread equity to my students. Again, as mentioned, for me not to be so exhausted from just trying to make them feel connected. And I realized that early on. My students produce so much content already for our district. We do a news every week, but we also live stream events. We also produce for our Delaware State Parks. We work with, PBS Student Learning Labs. We have all of these great things we do in person. And I realized very quickly at the start of this year that the overarching projects were not working for them. It was a struggle. And I think it's because they were so overwhelmed. And I really have worked on the idea of building the connections. So we start class just talking to each other. A lot of times it's me talking to blank Zoom screens, and I don't even know if they're laughing or not. Or, honestly, I'm like, guys, I don't know what you're thinking right now, but they respond in the chat. They do their work with me in person. And I have I've almost had a realization in the way that I'm working on my curriculum, in that I'm doing a lot of assessing during Zoom, since they're required to be there, since it's not asynchronous. And I know that AP is still going on. I know that they still have all these other things outlying, along with what I can't see outside of their cameras. I've found for myself what kept my sanity is doing a lot of that real-time assessment. So using tools like Jamboard and Padlet and all of these awesome digital tools that, we all got thrown into and had about 2 days to learn across the country. And it really does show that there is a boundary we have to acknowledge, but finding for every teacher how that works, I think, is so important, because for me, the assessment in real time is working. We have continued the news this year, surprisingly, but we also have had a huge influx of what we need to do. Like last night, we just live streamed an arts event in our courtyard so that seniors could actually perform and they could have a small audience. We're live streaming the senior honor cord night. We live streamed 4 graduations last year. So we were one of the only districts in our state to still hold our graduation because we live streamed it. So I really have pushed the balance of, I need to just see them working in class. And if they're not doing these huge projects they normally would do, I had to embrace that. I had to go, it's okay. Or it's okay they're filming at home. It's okay they're filming on Zoom. It's okay it's not going to be the level that it would be in person. And that is because we're not there in the classroom with them. And even with hybrid, when the students come in, I'm like, don't get on the Zoom. You're going to go film this interview, or you're going to go help this teacher set up a camera, because they just need that really like live time interaction. And I think that has also been another highlight of what all teachers always say is we go above and beyond constantly, and it's in our nature, and it's very difficult. As Chris mentioned and Angela said, it's very difficult to stop and go, it's okay that I'm not responding to this email. It's okay that the student said they can't turn it in. And for me, what has kept me sane is actually, instead of having hard deadlines, instead of really pushing the button on that, I've really worked on that idea of grace and compassion and just taking a step back. My internet's not working. Okay, just turn it in tomorrow. And for the most part, I've been pretty successful. The students aren't dragging their feet too much. I have a couple that, I call home at this point and I'm like, so how's life? How are we doing? Because I've talked to the parents so much, but I think that's, again, like something that we all have really looked at is how do we separate that home and that school life? And I think that moving forward, we have to keep thinking like that. How can we condense so that we're not constantly grading at home? We're not constantly going looking for those projects. I think that's important too.
And then Erica.
I was going to address when we talked about the social and emotional well-being of our students. We have, I think, a really good schedule. The way we do it in the elementary sector is I have a community time 4 days a week, 20 to 25 minutes where we just chat. The kiddos get on a Google Meet with me. We talk about what's going on. It's mildly structured, but they tell us all about their toys and their sports that they're doing and about their parents. And I've really been able to connect with my students a lot more than I thought I was going to. So our morning time, community time is just chatting and building community. Then I also do live lessons for an hour a day, ELA and math, where they can come and join and we can go over skills that I know that they need to work on. But we've really been able to get to know each other, which has helped them. I've had some parents say, why don't you do a lot of academic stuff in your first morning meeting? Well, because they need more than just academics. So they miss their friends. They do. So we've built a community that way. We actually got to meet yesterday for a little social distance class party at the park, but they got to see everybody in person and have a cupcake. And if parents were comfortable, they could play on the playground. So it was really neat. That is how we've tried to bring them all together because I know that they're missing their friends. Here at my school, we've done the same thing, live streaming. There's so many things that go into making a school feel like school. And, I've not worked in a high school, but elementary wise, it feels like a family. And we haven't been able to do the carnival that we always do and our morning assemblies that we do and book buddies, and things like that. So this year we have live streamed our announcements every day. So our principal is in our room every day in the morning so they can see the principal. And then on Fridays, we have a class perform something that they live stream. So we've tried to keep some things normal. It's been very different, but that's one of the ways that we're trying to hit those areas that make them feel like I'm part of a school.
That's awesome. I appreciate all of the effort that goes into that. Community is so important, and schools are so much more than just the academics. My next question is going to be for Ladera. Ladera, how did your approach or your outlook on EdTech change during the duration of remote and hybrid learning, if it did at all? And what do you think contributed to that change?
I think one of the biggest things that we've had to adjust to as educators and as school districts is to have a more student-centered model when it comes to student learning. Previously, I know as educators, we have so much to do in a day. but we've relied on the batch mode, factory industrial type models, especially at the high school level, because that's the level that I'm at. But these approaches don't quite capture the unique student traits or the hurdles or the disparities that the students actually experience. So we see, all districts are not created equal. Let's just call it what it is. Some have more access to other resources than compared to others. And so we fall behind with these outdated models for education. So I think that one thing that has come from this experience is that eyes have been opened. Voices are now being heard more so than ever. And it's forcing the public to actually acknowledge, hey, something is going on and we have to actually correct it. And so we have to consider time and space that is available for homework. We have to consider when there are students that are caring for siblings, we have to consider that life is happening for our students as well. And so I know with me specifically with work-based learning, I had to tell my students, guys, you can only work in the time frame that you're required to by law. I know you're working to help support your families, but we have to fall within the realms of our legal responsibilities. But you have children that are working to support entire families. So that's one of the things I will say that has come out of this is student-centered models, as well as the educator's role has shifted as well. We're always more than just teachers. We've become those sounding boards. We've become those extended family members. We've taken on a variety of hats that I think now is more respected in the public.
Those hands went up at the same time. Let's go Angela and then Elise.
Yeah, I'd really love to amplify what Ladera just said about disparity and really working to value our kids' skill sets inside of school. That needs to be happening all the time. And we are famously limited with regard to who we acknowledge. And I think that Ladera is absolutely right. This has reared its, like, there's nobody who this is invisible to anymore. So everyone's on notice, and I appreciate that. And that is something that we're definitely dealing with here too, and really trying to ferret those disparities out, and like I said, amplify talents and brilliance, because it is all around us, and always has been. So, and one of the things that I'd really like to piggyback on too is in this the way that we've sort of adapted and moved forward. One of the things that I also love that Ladera said was student-centered. And one of the things that I see taking place is we're moving away from those experiential online processes that we even use here. Like, I think, not to call anything out, Nearpod is a wonderful thing. It's so incredibly useful, but it's also the children are receiving that experience, as opposed to something that we're seeing now, like using more sandbox-oriented learning, like Minecraft or Scratch or Roblox, and really having the students drive and create and generate that learning and those experiences on their own. Because one of the things, and I know my esports friend is going to agree with me on this, sometimes the best way to teach human things is through technology. Using technology to really see our humanity inside of it is amazing. And the kids really respond to that, not just because we're inside their domain of technology, but also because we're talking about the real important things. The things that they understand with their heart and spirit are what actually drives us all as a community and as human beings. And I think that that's been a wonderful opportunity to see in this time.
Absolutely. Elise.
To both individuals who just shared, I mean, I echo everything you said. And for myself, I've been teaching, this is my 12th year in education. I came from industry, so how I taught was a little different, because it was the same kind of idea of, like, you kind of get thrown into the fire when you're in industry. You don't have somebody standing there saying, "It'll be okay, you got it." You work your way through. I love the idea of that concept of student-centered learning. I have had to do some work I got Teacher of the Year for my school, so I had to write essays and things like that. And what I kept harping on was this idea of the whole student. Why for 40 plus years is education focused on assigning a number to our students when we are such an individual person, even as teachers? And my master's paper, I had to write like my thesis. I think I titled something along the lines of like the standard of creativity, how standardized testing is killing our students' creativity. When we as teachers are pigeonholed into these boxes, and we have to achieve a grade for the student to then grade us, to then grade our school, to then grade funding, right there is that trickle-down effect that's such a huge problem. And no wonder students feel so disconnected when they come to school and they're sitting there, and teachers are doing their best. Of course they are, and teachers want to help and they want to be fair and caring. But as mentioned, we have so many things that are a wall that are preventing us from doing that. And in truth, let's look at the fact it's the people in the trenches who truly understand what is going on. We know what our students need, and they don't need to be held to one precise standard because, as you said, there are so many fantastic talents amongst every single individual that we encounter. And I think that is part of the frustration and why teacher burnout is very real. While teacher retention is such an issue across the country, it's because you get in here with the hope to build the minds of our future to be who they are, not to fit a certain, sheet of paper. And then you get into the educational setting, you get into the classroom, and you're like, oh, this is what's going on. And it's this realization of like, oh, I see why teachers are feeling that way. I strongly hope that everything that we have encountered this year and the enlightenment of people, not only in our general public, sorry, my lights have, not only in our general public, but my hope is that honestly, again, I say government and legislators, we need advocates that fight for the truth behind education, which is equity in the belief that every single student deserves what is best for them, not what people think is going to be best for them. Because as adults, nobody asks me to go pass a test to prove that I can do something, right? We get thrown into the fire in whatever situation we're in, as proven by teachers this year when we all said, all right, here we go. We got the next challenge. If we don't prepare them to go into the world and face obstacles the way that we understand they need to be able to do by allowing them to believe in themselves, that disconnect is going to continue. So I appreciate what both individuals said, and I truly do hope that this is not another scenario of let's go right back into things, because this is that opportunity to rebuild. This is that opportunity for us to be the advocates our students need. And if we want them to be successful, compassionate, equitable people in their future, then they need to see that in what we exemplify. And we can't truly exemplify that until we can do what we need to do for them without all of the overarching things.
What a great transition into my next question. Chris, some folks on the call are already alluding to this, but based on the past year, how do you think the instruction and practice have changed forever?
I can tell you how I hope it has changed forever. I think Ladara really nailed it, that this has shined a light on the incredible equity issues, not just from state, from districts, but even within your own district. And I'm really hoping that I see a commitment, from legislators, from administrations, from school boards, to really understand what it takes to make a school successful from an infrastructure standpoint, in the 21st century. This idea that, broadband internet, it's a right at this point. Access to information and education, and those who had and had not, was really highlighted through everything that's happened. I couldn't help, as a tech enthusiast, also be concerned the mercy that the education sector was at the private sector. I went out and I had to buy some licenses for some of the ed tech tools that I use that have free versions because I wanted some of those features. But then you also look at like a Zoom and a Microsoft and a Google, whose their products are free. What would we have done if Zoom, hadn't opened up the doors and allowed educators to use their tools for free. In the end, it helped their bottom line, but just how reliant we are on the private sector, really at their mercy, was something I found myself thinking about a lot. And overall, I had a good experience. It got to a point where I, sometimes paying out of pocket, you would just email the company and they very graciously would give you a license and stuff like that. But that was a concern, right? So I think I'm hoping that maybe legislators, administrators, folks at a state level, we can kind of get all on the same page about what needs to be done to make sure that going forward, every child has access to what they need. Even I was so happy to see how free and reduced lunch was handled, and how we made sure that those students who needed it most were able to, get what they needed. And some districts were even going above and beyond and making sure their family, got what they needed. And that made me proud that, educators and support staff here and unsung heroes, we're out in the parking lots, we're giving out, food for students to come pick it up. So going back to what Ladara said, not only has a light, kind of been shown on what's happening, I'm hoping that we see the changes that are needed to fix the systemic inequalities in our education system. I know that the educators are willing, to make the changes. I know that the educators always we put our kids first, and we do what we have to do what's best for our children. But we can only do so much within our classrooms for our kids. So I'm hoping to see, those who may have turned up their noses at some of the education funding bills and requests and budgets that came across their desks, and, well, why would we need something like this? Well, hopefully now they understand why we need stuff like this. So I'm hoping to see those changes where, we don't have to go park the internet bus in the cul-de-sac. Kids will have access to what they need to be successful, because at this point it's becoming a right. You know what I mean? And so that's what I'm hoping I see, is a true commitment to educating every student, now that we know a lot more than we did about the equity issues in education.
Thank you, Chris. Let's go Erica and then Ladera.
Okay, I agree, Chris. That was great. The way I'm looking at it too, for something that I'm hoping is relevant to what I'm doing, because I'm so heavily involved with families, because we are full virtual, is I'm hoping that families have seen exactly what it takes to educate their child. I'm also hoping that more families will get on board to support teachers in the education of their children. I'm hoping that with our school district that we can continue with the virtual academy, because I feel like there's a place for it. There are families that want to homeschool. There are families that want to be on their own schedule to do the things that they do, and they want to be able to finish the work on their own time schedule. So I'm hoping that it's created a rapport with parents where we can draw them in and say, help us educate your child, and kind of get that family unit involved with educating. If they choose to homeschool, this is what it takes. There's a lot that teachers do that a lot of people don't realize, and that families may not realize. I've had wonderful parents this year that have said, wow, I can't believe you do all this. Yeah, we do. We just do it because we love the kids. So I'm hoping that this allows better relationships between families and educators so that we can work together.
Thanks, Erica. Ladera?
Okay, everyone has made awesome points. I think we're all on the same page nationwide. But one thing we all know as educators is that we can't teach smartphone kids with landline strategies. Education has changed. And so my goal is that hopefully we can use more mobile apps to expand our student learning capabilities. They have their cell phones in their hands 25/8, as I like to say. And so the benefits of them actually utilizing that technology for good is that they can access apps and they can actually have flexible, personalized learning experiences. Another thing that I know someone touched on parent involvement. Tech will actually help increase parent involvement. Parents have their phones on them at all times too. And so with parents working full time, that will give them the opportunity to facilitate better communication between teachers and parents. And I also think that more tech companies are actually going to invest in education. I think that's going to be another trend that happens because education has historically been kind of seen as an underserved, underfunded industry. But with this current shift that we've experienced, technology in the classroom is changing. And so entrepreneurs and other companies are positioning themselves to invest more in education. And lastly, I hope that the classroom environments will actually prioritize ed tech. And in doing that, we're shifting our focus from the traditional pen and paper method to prepare them to not only be, college bound and career ready, but actually be able to adapt in these environments we plan on putting them in after graduation.
Thank you, Ladera. That you can't teach a smartphone kid with a landline strategy is gold.
You can't.
Elise.
I love that line. I make posters all the time and it's totally going on my wall because that is absolutely true. I'm just going to add to what you said very quickly. All of those things are part of the hope of what I think is really needed. And again, my fear is that it's going to get pushed to the back burner. And I think that we need to really push for the advocacy because let's face it, we can't assign a value to education. That is impossible to do. And, people try to break it down to numbers, and this is what teachers get paid, and they have off in the summers, and this is what each student costs. The value, we should have infinite possibility, just as we lead our students to believe they have infinite possibility, because that is our role as an educator, right? And if we can't have the funding we need to do all the things everybody just is talking about, if we can't have the funding to unfortunately pay for the licenses because capitalism is alive and well in this society, that's where there's a disconnect. And I think that, and I hope that, as we all have mentioned, this is where one of the biggest changes start to happen is, why do we argue about the worth of the education being provided to our students? Because there is no value assigned. The worth comes from these successful individuals that walk out of our classrooms, that move on and graduate, and ultimately choose to go into a career, choose to go into a skill set, or choose to go to college. And we talk about inequity and we talk about the systemic problems in society. We can't solve them with education, but true education that is not assigned a worth and education that allows us to actually build our students up to be successful, as mentioned, that can start to affect the change needed to really take away from some of those problems we have. But until we look at it that way, and until it's acknowledged by the people who make those decisions, that it can't change. And that's why all of this is so important, everything everybody just said. And I hope all the people mentioned in those discussions become advocates, because teachers have been the advocates fighting for a long time, and so has administration. And we need people now to join forces with us, because all of us are responsible for building a better tomorrow.
And Elise, I'm going to come back to you with this last question. I'd like to end on just hearing a little bit about as schools are reopening, I'd love to hear about your vision for ed tech in your classroom as students come back.
So I will be honest, I work in ed tech. Technically, I'm a tech teacher. So I use technology a lot, but in using a lot of the different things I've started to use this year, I realized how quickly that formative feedback can happen through those tools, and it happens without me having to collect little sheets of paper or do things that might again increase the burden on my shoulders, because as I often say to people, we are the atlases holding the sky upon our back. Societal problems trickle down to us, and we try to do everything we can to build our students up. I think ed tech is going to change how we interact with our content. I know for myself, that gradual release of responsibility that normally we have as teachers that we work through in the year, it happened like that. Instead of it being lectures and notes, which I didn't lecture 40 minutes a day, but Instead of that, students would use different devices to do some research and collectively come back together and have those discussions. And although they can't necessarily regurgitate every term I've taught them, I hear them talking in a way that demonstrates they have learned a lot. So for myself, I've already told the students, I believe I write good curriculum. And at this point, I believe my curriculum is going to just grow, because I really see the value in giving them the very basics and then throwing them into the fire, for a lack of term. I have already started saying to myself, instead of giving them notes with diversified methods, I'm going to just have a running Google slide presentation. I'm just going to have them do these Jamboards they collect and put in media albums. And then I'm just going to take them out and film. Instead of taking 3 days to learn, why not just give them the basics and just throw them into it? And I kind of did that before, but now I see that it works with how much I've had to condense my curriculum this year. Again, they can't necessarily check off every term, but they can explain to me where they see it. And I think that is hopefully how a lot of teachers will start to utilize ed tech, in the realization that because their phones are constantly at their fingertips, because they have access to these things, instead of making them sit and read and take all these notes and do all these different things, we can have them collect a database that they carry with them and really give them more of those opportunities for the hands-on, in-person, experiential learning that is so important that we do.
Thank you. I'm seeing lots of nods. I know we're coming up on time, so Angela, I think I'm going to let you have the last word.
Oh gosh, that's a lot of pressure. Actually, right on to piggyback on what Elise was saying, one of the fabulous things about this year and ed tech in general is having global and collaborative and community events. So for example, like Elise said, when you're going to roll out and let students have those experiences prior to that, that long and tedious background building that some teachers, that's some teachers' process. What you need then is some expertise. And right now we have the ability, and really it's not only are we capable of doing it, but it's accepted to call someone in California, for example, and have them Zoom in to your class in Florida. So now expertise has become really at your fingertips, and I absolutely love that. And I totally agree, like using a Padlet or a Google Doc or Miro to collect those things and really collectively construct information and knowledge and keeping it with you. I think that's brilliant, at least on your phone, moving it over there. But also one of the things that I see as an administrator is some of the things we've always known as best practice. For example, response time for students. That's become so wonderful here. You're having a limited interaction, let's say, you're exposing some content or some skill, and the students are having this very lively chat that's not completely different than what they would do in classrooms, except for now you have it to keep and become part of the sort of legacy of the moment of that experience. And they can construct knowledge together. They can make connections together. There are so many ways we have found so many ways just to use a simple chat feature in a WebEx or a Zoom call to hold that knowledge and to springboard each other into different places. So I think that we can move our best practices forward and actually see those through the lens of ed tech and collect them there. Also, thank you.
No, thank you. And thank you all so much. This conversation has been absolutely incredible. I am very happy to know that such strong advocates are out there for our students, for in all of our schools and in our school districts like you all. Just thank you again for sharing those experiences. In some ways, it's very back to basics. In other ways, the whole thing is new, right? But I know that you all are on the front lines of helping us craft, what the future of education looks like in this country. And I'm excited to partner with you moving forward in the Office of Educational Technology so that we can, to your point, Elise, to several of the points made, be advocates with you all because we understand and have the capability now of using technology to integrate and be one strong voice advocating for a future of education that is more equitable for our kids. So thank you all so much. Again, I appreciate it for you making the time.